God knows there are a lot of alcoholics and addicts of color in Denver. I rarely saw any in my meetings. I rarely see any here. So I feel like when they see someone who looks like them, and I always get compliments on, it's so nice seeing a brother on TV. It's so nice seeing someone on in the platform in the seat that you're in, not only reporting, but on the desk every day. So I'm like, if this is the platform that God has given me in order to speak to so many people, including my people, then let me open up, because I know my people have a fear of opening up about addiction and about alcoholism and all of those things.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Stacking Days podcast, where we highlight underrepresented journeys of sobriety within the BIPOC community. As always, I'm your host, Ray Donovan. I'm excited today. We have a brother by the name of Eddie that's going to be joining us. I'm sure that we're going to be covering a fair amount in his story, but just kind of being an observer from the outside looking in, I just want to touch on, a few things with him, such as facing the prospect of death in addiction, recovering out loud and being vulnerable in the public sphere, and then ultimately how he's created a platform for others to highlight their own stories of sobriety. So, really excited about the conversation today. So without further ado, I want to welcome Eddie to the show. What's up, Eddie?
Hey, Ray, thank you for having me also, and congratulations on your days, on your sobriety, and just another thank you for letting me come on here and tell a piece of my story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. I want to get right into it here. Why don't we go all the way back to the beginning, if you can recall for me, and kind of account for, for the listeners here, what was your entry into alcohol, and what was your why in drinking? I don't know if you're like me, where alcohol and your consumption of it, the reason behind it changed over time. But I'd love to be able to start at the beginning, and then we can kind of go from there.
All right. Well, for me, I feel like I will say that I have learned more about the reason behind my drinking as I have been in recovery and as I have been sober. I started drinking probably when I was, I would say I started drinking heavily when I was about 17 years old. I would say my first drink probably happened when I was like 14 or so. And I actually started like smoking marijuana before then. It was around 14, 13 when I first started doing that. Drinking came as, just kind of a fun thing that I feel like everyone did. I grew up in rural Texas, in Wichita Falls, Texas. Some people may say, hey, that's not really rural, but I mean, it's not the big city. It definitely has its areas. And I grew up in what is considered a small town in Texas. And small towns have their advantages to where everyone knows everyone for the most part, and everyone is very like family oriented. So even in my early drinking, I drank at friends' houses with their parents knowing, because there was always that kind of mentality of, as long as you do it maybe in the house or in someone's house in a family setting, then we're not worried about you, as long as we know you're not out running the streets drinking and driving. So my introduction to heavy drinking was drinking with my friends and drinking at my friends' homes and, their lake houses and things like that. I obviously, well, for me, I drank a lot. I know now, as a way to escape. I grew up pretty poor. We didn't have a lot of money. 3 kids in my family. I have 2 older sisters and my mom and my dad. And was born in California. They moved us to Texas, where I grew up when I was about 7. And I was always an overweight kid, and the only overweight kid in my family. My parents put me on a lot of diets, and so I was always, trying to lose weight or trying to meet the expectation of what either I thought I should be or what I thought other people thought that I should be. And so I know now that a lot of my drinking in my teenage years and even into my 20s and 30s had to do with how I felt as a child. And, I ate a lot, and that's my first addiction. And That's kind of where it all started. I ate a lot in high school, then I started to drink a lot because I wanted to fit in. I was struggling with my sexuality in my early years, especially in my teenage years, being a young Black kid raised in a Christian household. Like being gay was not ever something that was talked about, let alone accepted. If that was your lifestyle, you didn't talk about it, and I don't mean not talk about it with people outside of your house. You really didn't talk about it within the house. And so I feel like now I know that I drank as an escape because I was dealing with like who is truly Eddie, and I didn't know, and I didn't find that out for a very long time.
Yeah. Man, that's a lot to to reconcile at a very young age, right? And when you're thinking about escaping, where are you going to escape to, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you who you are, I would imagine fundamentally, just can never feel like it can be exposed, right? How did how did-
Absolutely.
how so within your community in Texas, what did that ultimately matriculate into? When you were escaping, I'm assuming you had a social set of friends. Were you able to be more of yourself? Did you feel more empowered when you were drinking so that you could be and feel more of yourself? What exactly did it do for you that ultimately acted as that mechanism that you could lean on in times where you're really challenged?
I feel like for me at that time, it magnified um, the positive characteristics, or at least what I thought were positive characteristics. And I would go back now and say that a lot of those were. I felt more comfortable being myself because I've always been a funny person. And
Mhm.
so people like to laugh with me. And, I was one to crack a joke. And I was always one to make someone laugh before they could laugh at me. As I said, like being an overweight kid, that was how I got through. I'm going to make you laugh before you make a joke about me and everybody else is laughing at me. So that's kind of how I went about it. And when I drank, I felt that I wasn't really thinking about it. It was just coming. It was
Mm.
coming naturally. So like I just felt like I am on top of the world. I'm funny Eddie, and I'm more of a funny Eddie when I'm drinking. And, later on, I found out that all of that laughter wasn't really people laughing at my jokes. It was more of them laughing at what I was doing. And I was making a fool of myself. But I didn't see the difference at the time. I saw you all laughing, and that must mean that I'm entertaining you, and that must mean that you're my friend, and that must mean that you want to be around me, which then I started to identify with love. Oh my gosh, these people love me because I'm being this person. And since that always worked for me, or it worked for me at 17, 18, it worked for me when I was 19 and 20, and then became 21 and you can legally drink, I can buy it myself. Oh my gosh, I'm going to take full advantage of this and make sure that I can shadow whatever I need to shadow in order for me to be this person that I think I need to be, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I mean, and that's what's that? That's 5-6 years on this kind of trajectory of putting up these walls effectively, to protect yourself. So, I want to talk a little bit now about when did you start transitioning into a space perhaps where it wasn't working for you in the way that it once had, and you're starting to come to the realization that it's perhaps causing more issues for you than it is providing good.
Well, I drank like through college. I went to Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, an HBCU, which was
Mm.
something that my grandpa wanted me to do. He felt like my the way that I moved, the way that I talked, the way that I acted, I needed to get the Black college experience, which I'm
Right.
so happy that I did. But it's funny because I think he thought that that was going to change me. And
Mm.
it didn't. I still am the Eddie. I'm the same Eddie. I mean, I don't drink anymore, but I went to Southern and I had a great time in college. I graduated college. I ended up having gastric bypass because I had all of these health issues. And so the obesity was eliminated, the food addiction was finally gone, and then this addiction that I already had with alcohol, all of a sudden it just exacerbates. It gets bigger and bigger. And then I graduate school. I go to grad school out there, I graduate that, I move back home to Wichita Falls, and I start experimenting with not only more alcohol, but with drugs. I
Mm.
started working in my field of journalism, and then I met all these friends who, smoked a lot. I met some friends who did some other stuff, and then I started doing that too. And of course, in this time, I have dropped 200 pounds. So I'm finally like looking like the Eddie that I've always wanted to look like. And then I'm drinking and I'm like, oh my gosh, this life feels really good. Um, and I say that to say it wasn't great, but I didn't realize that because I got a promotion. I ended up getting a job in Tulsa, so I moved up in market size into a bigger city. I started reporting, and that's what my goals were. And then it just got out of hand in Tulsa. And one night in Tulsa, after just drinking a lot with some friends, I ended up like passing out in my friend's apartment. They put me up in one of their rooms, passed out, and I slept for maybe like 5 6 hours. I think I had partied all afternoon into the night, so I think I went to bed, I would say somewhere around 11 12, slept till about 6 in the morning, and I didn't have to work until 2 in the afternoon. But I wake up and I'm like, holy crap, my dog is at home, I need to get home. I feel that I'm okay to drive because I've slept for 6 hours.
Mhm.
I get in my car, my aunt's car, by the way, because my car broke down, so I was driving hers. I get in my aunt's car to drive home. It happens to be the day that Tulsa is shutting down this major street, Riverside, so that they could build this park called a Gathering Place, which they mimicked after this park in New York. So they closed down the main road, or they're getting ready to. I drive down the street, I black out, and I crashed the car into a tree on live TV. My
Oh.
station is out there live, so are all the other stations. And
Mm.
I crashed
So
my car.
on the closed road?
Well, so this was the day they were closing. So
Okay.
the road was still open, like maybe one lane. I
Right.
fall asleep, veer off of the road, crash into a tree. And I remember coming to when gaining consciousness, basically, when I hear medics outside say, I think we have a dead body.
Mm.
And I wake up. And I mean, bags are deployed.
And
We're
that
on the
dead body
car.
is you.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
And I wasn't. Obviously. And they pulled me out of the car. And I remember I'm trying to walk and they're telling me, no, 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 don't walk, don't walk. But I'm fine. I My arm ends up in a sling, like I had a sprained arm, but no broken bones, no anything. And they basically took me to the hospital before I went to jail and was booked for a DUI.
Mm.
And that is one of my rock bottoms. I didn't stop drinking then, but that was what I remember as one of the lowest moments of my drinking career.
Man, that's first of all, thank God, you walked out of that at least physically, unscathed. For the most part, I would assume there was a huge degree of exposure at
Mhm.
that point on you and some of the things that maybe were latent in your lifestyle that were now kind of coming to a head. How did you at that point then reconcile that with your employer? How did you reconcile that within yourself? Because I'm assuming that even though it was you had the DUI, and maybe in retrospect you can look back and say this is a rock bottom, you obviously it didn't have the impact in the moment because you kept drinking, right? So
Mhm.
what's going on with you at this point? Because it seems like a really pivotal, you kind of turning point in where you are heading next.
So I end up getting suspended, placed on a suspension as they're trying to investigate what's going to happen.
Hmm.
Mind you, my station was out there. They were reporting on it. They actually mentioned we just heard a car crash, or you just saw that car crash in back of us in that morning live shot. All the other stations were there too. I was in fear. I was in fear for days and a much longer time after that. But in that moment, I knew that I had worked so hard for this career. This is all that I've ever wanted to do since I was 8 years old. I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to be a reporter, and I knew that what I was doing was taking all of that away.
Yeah.
And I had friends come over and check on me. One of my friends at my station is actually the person who bailed me out. And I just sat in fear, and I sat in anger, and I sat in confusion. And of course, the next day, my friends come over, and I have my arm in a sling because I'm out of the hospital, I'm out of jail. They come over to check on me, and I answer the door with my arm in a sling and a vodka and grapefruit in the other hand because I'm at home. Like, what am I going to
Right.
do?
Right.
In my mind, I'm about to lose everything, so might as well go out all the way. And I did not end up losing my job, thank God. I have some people who have been very supportive of me. I have a great agent who worked with my news director and my general manager at the time, and basically said, this kid has a problem. Ending his career is not going to help him. It's going to
Mm.
do more damage than good. I ended up keeping my job. But in your question, what was it like? It was hard because I had a lot of people who felt that I should not have kept my job, that I
Mhm.
brought this on myself. There are a ton of people who want this position, who there are a ton of people who are doing what they would say is the right thing. And here this person is drinking, crashed his car on TV, and you're going to let him keep his job.
Mm.
And so I spent another year under my contract there trying to build that trust back and
Mm.
trying to build that respect back. And so what I was doing was not drinking and driving. I was not taking pictures with drinks in my hand, but I was still drinking. And I tried to calm down, and I think I did for a while. But of course, the alcoholic, the addict that I am, it crept back up.
Mhm.
Um, and I eventually ended up getting another promotion. Just like when I went from Texas to Tulsa, Oklahoma, I went to Denver, Colorado, my dream station, KUSA, Channel 9. I worked there for 5 years. And I got the job there, and I said, oh my God, God has given me this position. Eddie, you can't go there and mess this up. So I said that I wasn't going to drink. And I drank, but I didn't drink in excess. But I live right next door to a bar. And the one day, 3, 4 months into me being in Denver, that I went to that bar. Now I went to other bars and drank, but I didn't really get wasted or drunk. I would there would be a couple of nights, I'm sure. But the first night that I went to that bar that was right next to my house was
Mhm.
it. The drugs came back, the drinking came back, and I would say I drank for a good year and a half in Denver before getting sober.
Man. And so the floodgates just opened up on you, and
Mhm.
and that was it.
Yeah.
So you're in Denver. You've strung together some success, and then obviously exposed yourself to some massive detriment, right?
Mhm.
I feel like I've talked to enough folks now and recognize that moderation is almost impossible when it comes to substance abuse. What do you do at that point? What's the trajectory look like? I mean, I'm assuming the wheels are now, very shaky. You're looking at the prospect of how do you hold this all together, especially in you're in the public sphere. So eyes are constantly on you. What does the road look like now, leading up to your sobriety?
It was very rocky. I had a couple of trips with some friends that I call now the days of the end times, because it was the end of my drinking, but it could have been really bad. It could have been the end of my life.
Mm.
And I will say, like, towards the 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 weekend before I stopped drinking, I got invited to a party for a friend who was a producer at my station. She had decided to get out of the business, and she was going to go work for the Children's Hospital in Denver, in Aurora. And so she had a big going away party. It's a Friday, it's a payday. I get paid. I get off because I'm on the morning show. And so I get off around 11, and I am like, okay, well, I'm going to have to wait until 5, 6 o'clock until, the party starts. So I pregame,
Mm.
and one of my friends picked me up. I think I'm there for 2 hours. By 8 o'clock, I was incoherent. I couldn't strum together 5 words. I was staggering, stumbling, which was something that they were all used to seeing.
Mm.
And it got to the point where I was asked to leave.
Oh,
Like the
really?
bartender brought me a drink, and I think once he saw what was wrong, he was like, "Hey," and he told my friend, "You guys got to go." And she was just like, "Well, I didn't do anything." They put me in an Uber. They send me on my way. The very next day, they call me. I don't know what happened. I just know that I got home because that was my life. And they asked, they're like, "Eddie, we need to let's go meet here at this coffee place." So we went downtown, and Denver has coffee places that also are bars. And so I thought we were going for drinks because that was my life. And they sat me down and had this intervention that I later found out they had attempted like 2 to 3 times
Really?
and got so scared that they backed away from it. And they just basically said the Eddie that we know, the Eddie that we knew, is no longer here. There's this cloud over you. If either you don't show up to stuff or you show up, and when you do show up, you're late. If you're late, you're already drunk. Sometimes you leave, you disappear. We don't know where you are until the next day. And they told me that I needed help. And I thought I was keeping it all together. So I was just like, it's fine, until I realized that the people that I knew cared about me, I was also hurting them. That's when I was just like, okay, it's a real problem. It's not just
Mm,
Eddie hurting himself. I think I had came to terms, I know I had come to terms with, I'm probably going to die an alcoholic. I'm going to die drinking. Like, this is just probably what's in the cards for me. But it was okay as long as it was just me. And once I realized I was hurting other people, um, that's when I wanted to do something. So I was seeing a therapist at the time. I talked to my therapist. She ended up telling me about a 12-step meeting that was literally 2 blocks from my house.
mm,
And so I went there one night, and then I went back again. And I just kept going back. And at first, I didn't think that it was going to work. I was actually counting the days, not of sobriety, counting the days until I was going to say, this shit is over. This is done.
mm.
I don't want to do this anymore. And that day never came. And all of a sudden, I strung together all this time where I started to see the differences in my life. And I was like, this life is better than that life. And I just wanted to stay on this path.
Man, congratulations.
Thank you.
It sounds like it was a very rocky road in getting to that point, but congratulations on embracing that and, and maintaining that consistency and just, opening yourself up to the potential of what that new life could look like for you.
Thank you. It was hard, and looking back, I'm just like, wow, because November 3rd of this year will be 5 years of sobriety, and thank you. And it just looking back, I'm just like, has it been 5 years? And I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, it's definitely been 5 years.
This is off track, but do you think about it every single day, even at 5 years in? Or is it just part of your lifestyle now?
Being sober,
Yeah.
I do, because I get up and I have this newfound routine. I used to be late for everything. I never was really on a schedule, although I say that I was on a schedule. But now my life is so scheduled, and it just has to run um uh, uh, on a routine, that because I do certain things every single day, I know that I do them because I'm sober,
Mm,
and I know that I act the way that I do now and respond to things the way I do because I'm sober. So it is something that I am constantly thinking about. I wouldn't say it's every single minute, but I do know that when I'm reminded most is when I stray off of that
right.
routine. If somebody asks me, if someone says they're going to do something, and I say, okay, I'm going to be here, and they're not there, that messes me up. And my attitude changes. And then I'm just like, Eddie, you need to get to a meeting.
Mm,
You need to focus. You need to do some reading. You need to do some meditation, because um, life is life. And life is not going to always be the exact same way that it's supposed to be. But for me, this routine has helped me. So I'm just like, I gotta have some structure. So I do think about it.
yeah. Uh, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, I think that for me as well, routine and the pursuit of routine has been really important for me in amassing 2 years of in being sober. And I agree, like when the routine's off, or when there is something out of place that can have a dysregulating effect on an individual who is trying to walk a specific path. So I appreciate that even 5 years in, that is still very much be a reality. I want to go back to something that you had said about the moment in which you recognized that this is something you needed to address. Two questions. One, was your involvement in AA, was that kind of mandated by your job, or was it ultimately up to you, or was that a stipulation that was put on you in order to kind of maintain your employment at the station?
No, because I had moved to Denver. I had left the job in Tulsa where the car
Yeah,
wreck and everything happened. And so I got to Denver, but I started seeing those same things that were happening in Tulsa happen in Denver. And I was just like, I can't lose it. I can't lose it here. I've come so far. I graduated from Wichita Falls to Tulsa, from Tulsa to Denver, these big markets. Like I can't go back. And so when I got kicked out of that bar and then I looked back at everything that was happening, I got kicked out of that bar that weekend and I say, oh, that was the weekend that my friends took me out. But I had blacked out and passed out in a bar bathroom the weekend before. I
right.
had blacked out the weekend before. I had fallen asleep on my stoop at my apartment in downtown Denver the weekend before that. So it was so many weeks of just continuous, like, just downfall.
Yeah,
So when I got sober, I knew that there had to be a change, but my therapist suggested the 12-step program, and it was always a suggestion, but it was never like mandated or anything that I was
gotcha,
told that I had to do.
gotcha. Okay, cool. Other question I had about that moment and that window in time is that you mentioned that you recognized how you were hurting others around you. I've found in my own experience that there's a recognition of the hurt that you've placed on others, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get to a point of recognition because you're so
Mhm.
consumed with your own journey. You're so consumed with yourself, and being very much about the self. What did that epiphany look like to you, and then how did you go about trying to rectify and redeem yourself with some of those folks who are really close to you, that you identified in you hurting?
That was step 9 in my process. And so about 9 months into sobriety, when I had got to that ninth step, which dealt with making those amends and addressing certain things and people, um, the biggest one for me was obviously my parents.
Mm,
And it's crazy the way that God works, because I had planned it. Once again, my routine, and I planned, okay, this is when I'm going to do it. I'm on this step now. I'm going to go home. So I'm going to talk to my parents here. I am leading meetings in Denver. I was leading a meeting on a Sunday. And my dad is a double amputee from his diabetes. And he had a traumatic medical episode one weekend, about a week and a half before I was scheduled to leave Denver to go back to Texas for a week for vacation.
mhm.
And he slipped into a coma. He slipped
Yeah,
into a diabetic coma. And my uncle, his twin brother, called and was telling me, he was like, the doctors are saying that it's touch and go. We don't know if he's going to make it. So I end up going home, and my dad is he's intubated. He's not breathing on his own, and all of a sudden, I just went into this. Okay, what do I do? And I was there for my dad. He actually came out of it and everything like worked out. He started breathing again. They took him off the machine like a day or two later. But in that trip, I was able to sit down with my mom, and we're at home in the 1 or 2 hours that we weren't in the hospital, and we're sitting outside in the backyard on her swing, I remember. And I she knows that I had been in recovery and everything, but I started making my amends. And
right.
I remember telling her about everything that I had did, the money that I had taken, the lies that I did told. And my sponsor in my 12-step program told me, he always ended his amends with, not necessarily I'm sorry, but how do I make it right? What do I do to make it right? And I told my mom that, and her words were, you already have. And she said that you're present. And she said, you being here and being present is so much different than the way you showed up before. Because I physically showed up, but I wasn't really there. And I was able to actually be the son and the man that she needed to help her get through this situation with my dad being on what we thought was his deathbed. And it meant the world to me to hear that, like, you're present. And hearing her say that let me know that I am presently showing up in more than just this situation, everything else that I was doing. And so that was kind of like another epiphany or light bulb moment that the road that I was on was the right one and that my life was actually doing and getting better.
Man, it's always so it means so much when you can make an impact, a positive impact on the people that you've left such a negative impression on for such a long time. You know, I find, I mean, you were drinking for, a fair amount of time. There's a lot of damage that can be done, over the course of time. And I find, at least in my own journey, there's a degree of frustration because you want to be able to redeem, you want to be able to try to fix things, but it takes time to be able to do that.
Mhm.
But when you get those sentiments from people that you are trying to redeem yourself with, that it's actually working, I think that just, puts wind in your sail, so to speak, right? So that you can continue on the journey. So I'm sure your mom is extremely proud of you. How did it go over with your father once he, was able to regain a lot of his faculty?
It went over just as well. I don't feel like I ever had that full on like conversation like I did with my mom. Like, I mean, I'm closer with my mom. And my mom is really in touch with her emotions for the most part, at least a lot more than my dad. So, like, my dad is more like, tell me what's going on. Okay, you told me, let's move on. Where my mom is like, okay, how does this make you feel? Like, how are you doing? And she's checking on you constantly. And she says, I love you and I'm here for you. And so, like, the conversation that I had with my dad was very different than I had with my mom, but I still feel and know that he has forgiven me, and it didn't take me apologizing or making my amends for that forgiveness to happen. That's what I thought personally. They had forgiven me a long time ago. And so that went over well. I made amends with my sisters, both of them, because I had said some things in a conversation to my older sister that I could never take back and that I always will be sorry for, but our relationship is better. My other sister, both of them are older. I'm really close to my sister Monica. We just talk every single day, and she's a therapist, and she spotted my alcoholism years before I did,
Mm,
and she had been telling me I needed help. So it's made our close relationship even closer.
mm, that's great. You've been sober now for almost 5 years in November. What are some of the early tools that you turn to in order to stay consistent? I mean, I know that being part of AA and that program obviously was a huge part of your early success. But what were some of the other tools that you turned to, and also what were some of the most challenging aspects of early sobriety that you interacted with and you ultimately got over?
Honestly, the 12-step program did a lot, but I was seeing a therapist who actually suggested that. And my therapist, the work that we did leading up to me going into a 12-step program and then the separate work that we did after, like, it is a mixture of all of those tools. She helped me to see why I was drinking. She helped me to see that I still had so much bottled up inside of me because of how I felt as a kid, how I felt
Hmm.
I was raised, how I felt that I was received, how I felt that I was talked to. I was holding on to all of that. And so I was drinking because of it. And then after I got sober, I was still kind of an angry person in recovery sometimes because I'm no longer drinking, which was my outlet, and I'm still bottling all this stuff up. So what's helped me in the entire recovery and sobriety process is really learning, like, who I am, who I was, and dealing with that. Like,
Hmm.
dealing with it, addressing it, accepting it, and then letting it go. I had a lot of resentments towards my family, towards my parents, towards, like, why, like, especially when it came to my sexuality. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
come out until I was 28. And so I had a lot of built up resentment to how they handled or the things that they didn't say or the things that I felt that they didn't say or should have said. And I finally, in recovery, realized it's the past
Mm-hmm.
and there's nothing that I can do to change that. I now realize that my parents are my parents and they did the best that they could. They raised their kids themselves, which both of my parents were raised by their grandparents. So what I've learned is that in them raising their kids themselves, getting a house, keeping us all under one roof, that was such a success to them. And it is a success. I can go back and say, oh, I wish you had did this. I wish that you had done that. But what they did was do better than what they had. And I
Mm-hmm.
just had to finally accept that. And accepting all of that with my family has been one of the main and key ingredients to me accepting myself and just in staying sober and on this road of recovery because I am no longer worried about all of that stuff.
Yeah. That's yeah. I mean, I appreciate you calling that out. Just when I look at the chronological timeline, you you came out at 28. How does that kind of line up with your sobriety date? I don't know how old you are. So were
I'm
you were,
39. I'll be 39 in February.
okay? So you were so okay. So you were out for several years before becoming sober. So we talk a lot about trying to be true to oneself, the authentic self, in sobriety, in the pursuit of sobriety. Uh, how have you been able to be more of who Eddie is now versus when you were putting up a lot of those protections and coping, in many ways with the alcohol and some of the drugs?
I think or I know Denver is, and because you talked about that you live there, and Denver is not very diverse as it is progressive, and it is far more progressive, and was a great place for me as far as my sexuality is concerned, versus North Texas and Southeast Oklahoma. Which is all Bible Belt, which is all red area. And so when I moved to Denver, I finally felt like I was in a place where I felt accepted, not only by other people who are of the LGBTQ plus community, but all people. Like honestly, I don't know if back then I would have been able to have a full-on conversation with you and feel completely comfortable saying all of these things and being my authentic self. I think being in a place where I felt that I felt accepted, and then of course being sober in that same place, that's all helped me on my journey to like really being able to express myself and be my full authentic self. Um, Sobriety played a huge role in that, though. I feel like once I was able to have a clear mind and say, "This is who I am. This is who I want to be." And mind you, all of this is being done on TV too, which is also another piece of, another layer. But
Mm,
at Nine News in Denver, I started anchoring. And I got to anchor the weekend of a Pride in Denver about 3 years ago with my really good friend. I got to co anchor with him, who is also a person of color, a man of color, and gay. And we have these two men of color, gay, on TV anchoring, telling their coming out stories, and we get all of these emails about how amazing it is. And so it's those little things where I felt like, oh my gosh, I am accepted and I can be myself and people like me being myself. I think that I have taken that with me now that I live in Kansas.
hmm. That's awesome. I always applaud and it when folks can just kind of step into who they are and feel comfortable. I mean, we live in a world where we keep so much hidden, often sometimes from ourselves, and then certainly from the outside world. So I'm glad that you got to a place where you could feel more you and expose that light to the folks who are around you. And in exposing that light, let's fast forward to today, right?
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the service that you're doing, quite frankly, when it comes to highlighting others? I've seen some of the work that you've done, but I'd really like to hear how that came to pass with your employer, how you proposition them, and kind of what the reception's been. So maybe give us a little bit about what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so I live in Kansas now, but before I left Kansas, of course, I was in Denver. I got sober in Denver, was sober 3 years before moving and getting this job, smaller city but bigger job. I was a
Mm-hmm.
fill-in anchor and reporter in Denver, reported 5 days a week on the morning show, and then I anchored the noon show and filled in on the weekend show. But then I got this job as the main morning anchor at the NBC affiliate in Wichita. But before I left Denver, I did Recovery Week. And it was me telling these stories of recovery from all of these people that I had met in Denver. And I pitched it to my boss. And I remember being like, I set up a meeting and I was like, hey, they knew I was in recovery because I told them about it when I first went into it. And I remember telling my boss, hey, I want to do this series on recovery and I want to tell all these recovery stories. And she was like, yeah, let's do it. And I was so surprised. And she just goes, why do you seem relieved? And I said, well, it's a big thing to say, hey, I want to tell these stories of recovery and I don't mind talking about my own recovery. And that's what I love about Denver and I love about my old boss, MJ, is that she and my old station, they always wanted me to be Eddie. They always wanted me to be my authentic self. And I think seeing that my place of business wanted that, it allowed me to take it, to where I am now. Fast forward to me getting the job here. I brought that. First of all, my recovery series from Denver is on my resume reel. So any news director who was thinking about hiring me, they knew I was in recovery because I wanted that to be known. I was not going to hide that. I was no longer going to live a life where I hid who I was, especially when this part of me is what has helped me get to where I am now. So when I interviewed here in Kansas, my news director knew all about it. We talked about it. And when I ended up taking the job, I told her, I was like, I want to bring Recovery Week to Kansas. And they were like, okay, let's do it. And so I found a home group 12-step program here and start going to meetings and just started meeting other people. One of my first stories was a recovery story. And from that person that I did the story on, he introduced me to somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. That last September, we were able to do this recovery week and it did so well. And they asked me to MC Recovery Idol, which is a talent show for all these people in recovery. And so I MC'd that. Fast forward another year, here we are. I just wrapped on Recovery Week a couple of weeks ago. September is Recovery Month. So I told my story in Denver and I've talked about my story here, but tomorrow is actually the first time that people are going to see a piece of my story because I was asked to include it at the end of Recovery Month for the special that's going to air tomorrow at 12:30. So it's kind of a full circle thing, but I love it. Like I brought that series here and it's help so many people. I feel like I get a lot of emails. I also launched my Zero Proof Life, which is my page on Instagram, and it's all of the stories that I've done. It's just little inspirational quotes and messages that I see. I follow all of these other recovery pages, and I'm able just to repost things or I post things on my story there, and those also go to my Facebook page. But it's just that's what I'm doing now. And that's kind of my piece of giving back, is making sure that there are people who know that they're not alone and that there is a way out. It doesn't have to be my way. It doesn't have to be a 12-step program. It can just be knowing somebody else who is sober and in recovery and being able to sit down and talk to them. And especially a person of color, a Black man, because I don't see a lot of that here. I didn't see a lot of that. God knows there are a lot of alcoholics and addicts of color in Denver. I rarely saw any in my meetings. I rarely see any here. So I feel like when they see someone who looks like them, and I always get compliments on, it's so nice seeing a brother on TV. It's so nice seeing someone in the platform in the seat that you're in, not only reporting, but on the desk every day. So I'm like, if this is the platform that God has given me in order to speak to so many people, including my people, then let me open up, because I know my people have a fear of opening up about addiction and about alcoholism and all of those things. So if I can open that door or shed some light and let someone know I also battle with this and it helps them, then I feel like I've done my part.
Yeah. I mean, courage, right, is the word that comes to mind. And I feel like sometimes folks need an example of courage to tap into their own. So I love what you're doing. I've been, like I said, I've been following you for some time. And I will also say that I was looking for, being that you are in the public sphere and you're on television, I was looking for other outlets where you shared your story, I came up shorter than I would have liked. So I'm happy to hear that you're also going to be sharing, your journey, on your platform. I'm sure that a lot of folks will be able to get tons from that too.
Thank you. Yeah, and so it'll air tomorrow, and I'll post it on my Zero Proof Life page tomorrow also, so that people can actually see that. I've told it before in Denver, but it's one of those things where like it's on one platform at another station. Now I work for another company, so I
Right.
can't really just be posting all that all the time. But I
Right.
do. I love this. I love that I get to like do these podcasts and get to like talk about it because it's therapeutic for me. I love it.
So that's awesome. It's therapeutic for me too. That's one of the reasons why I created the show, just so that I could talk to more people of color who have kind of, trailblazed their own paths in a lot of ways in sobriety. So again, thank you for coming on. I have a few more questions that I'm going to throw your way as we close this out. The first one is really kind of a softball, I feel like, and then I'll give you a little bit of a more fastball question. But for someone who's kind of just sitting there at home right now, or or on the social platforms, or Googling, do I have a problem, and they're not really sure where they kind of land on the spectrum of their own potential addiction. What would you say to that person who has got to a point where they say, like, "Look, this is not working for me, but I don't necessarily even know what the first step is that I'm going to take"? What would you suggest?
I've always been told, like, and you always hear the cliche, the first step is admitting that you have a problem. I
Mm,
think the first step is addressing and really acknowledging and thinking about it. Like if you're questioning it, then research that question. Like
mm,
dive deeper into that. If you're thinking, do I have a problem? Am I drinking too much? Analyze that. Like how much do you drink? Like I always said that, but I'm like, oh, I don't drink that much. But I realized that I did, and I realize it more so now. So I would say, like social media is such an amazing tool. And if you're afraid of going to a 12-step meeting, if you're afraid of something like that, I would just say seek therapy. The best thing for me is like being able to talk to someone else, but also social media. There are so many pages of recovery that there's going to be one there's going to be a whole bunch that you would relate to,
hmm
and so just do your research on that. I mean, we spend all day scrolling on our phones looking for clothes, looking for things like that. Like, why not look for something that is going to make us feel good beyond 5 minutes, beyond a day? And I think that social media is a great tool for that.
Agreed. Second question I have, and you alluded a little bit to this earlier in talking about your sister, the therapist, identifying that you had an issue before you identified for yourself. My question to you, though, is, and I think this is a particularly sensitive topic within communities of color, because we are so secretive about where we're at and our mental health, and and what repercussions those have on our overall well-being. How would someone in your darkest days, when you were struggling, known that you were struggling without you kind of telling them explicitly that you were in a bad place?
Mhm. I think for me, especially with the person who knew my sister, Monica and I are 15 months apart.
Mm,
So we grew up with people thinking we were twins, and we've always been so close. And she's watched me. The first time that we were apart was when I was 16 and she went to college. And when she would come back, we would talk. And then when we would go off to college, she would go her route to Atlanta. I'd go my route to Louisiana. She would see it. And she just said it early on. I want to say Monica said this before she was even a therapist, before she'd even graduated school. She was saying, you need to watch your drinking. Like, you drink a lot. And I didn't think it was a lot, and I would joke about it. I would always, I joked about the word alcoholic. Well, I'm an alcoholic. And I would say that to my friends when I really didn't know what that word meant. But maybe I did know what it meant. Like, maybe I was,
Right.
really like seeing that early on. What was your question? How do you accept it?
No, my question is, how would someone have known that you were struggling without you being explicit to them that you were struggling?
I just think because we were so close and that she saw it. I
Yeah.
think Monica also knew, and I found this out later on. She had been waiting for me to come out. She wasn't going to out me and tell me I was gay. And there
Right.
are like family members who will do that. Part of me wishes that maybe, she had have been like, I know, and I would have felt more comfortable saying it early on. But I think that Monica knew that I was struggling with my sexuality. She already knew that I was struggling with my weight. And at the time that she addressed that I had a problem with alcoholism, I was still 430 pounds.
Gotcha.
So she saw my struggle, and she saw what I was using for an outlet, and she saw that outlet was becoming an even bigger struggle.
Mm. Man, it sounds like you got a great sister there. So shout out to her for sure for being a champion of yours. Eddie, look, I'm really appreciative of the time that you took to spend with us. I mean, for those of you listening, Eddie told me that he gets up at 2:30 in the morning to get to his desk. So I am glad that he's spending some time with us here today to talk about his story, his journey, and quite frankly, like just the transformation that you've undergone in probably the last 10 years or so of your life. So shout out to you. Thank you for spending some time on the Stacking Days, and I will continue to look out for you. But before we leave, where can everybody find you so they can get more Eddie after they're maybe hearing you for the first time on the Stacking Days podcast?
So on Facebook, Eddie Randle, EDDIERANDLE. I have a professional page, and all of my stories that go on come from my Instagram page, My Zero Proof Life. So that's at My Zero Proof Life, all one word. All of my stories that I upload there also go to my Facebook page, but a lot of times I'll put different things on both pages, so people can find me on there. Those are the two biggest social media platforms. At Eddie Randle on Twitter, of course, or X, however you're supposed to say it now. That's the best way to find me. Or I am one of those people who will always check my email. I always tell people shoot me an email, and it's just my name, Eddie Randle85@gmail.com.
Awesome. Eddie, thank you so much. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you. And congratulations to you too. And thank you so much for what you're doing for not only the entire sober community, but for people of color. Like, this is absolutely amazing.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that. I'll be in contact, and I'm going to continue to follow you. Everyone, we'll be back next time. So stay tuned. Okay. Talk soon. I appreciate you guys listening to the Stacking Days podcast. I hope this episode added value to your recovery and wellness journey. Before we go our separate ways, let's connect on social. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Stacking Days, or via the website www.stackingdays.com. By supporting the show, you can play a direct role in amplifying people of color in their pursuit of recovery. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe or hit the follow button. This way, you'll never miss an episode, all while playing an active part in creating the ecosystem where diverse voices and healing matter. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. For more information on the resources and support available, take a look at SAMHSA and some other resources shared in the description. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.